Hey there, HorseCenter fans. Matt and I are back with another exciting edition of the show. Matt, we are talking Arkansas Derbies, two of them, plus other big stakes this weekend at Oaklawn Park.
We sure are, Brian. It sounds like we've been sounding like a broken record, but closing weekend of Oaklawn Park and lots of big racing.
Four big ones, including the Oaklawn Handicap, an excellent edition of the Oaklawn Handicap, and a full field for the fantasy. Watch Matt and I analyze right now here on HorseCenter. Welcome to another edition of HorseCenter, everyone. I am Brian Zipsy, and as always, I have the outstanding pleasure of being joined by my co-host to the East Coast, that's Matt Shipman. How are you today, Matt?
I am good, Brian. How about we go looking around the country for the best races to discuss on HorseCenter today?
Yeah, Matt, I don't think we need to look around the country, and I'm going to jump out on a limb here and say this is the best weekend of racing that we'll see in the whole entire first half of 2020, Matt, because we got four really big stakes. They have some other good fields going at Oaklawn, but Matt and I are going to dive deeply into two divisions of the Arkansas Derby, of course, as well as the Oaklawn Handicap and the Fantasy Stakes. Matt, let's not keep them waiting any longer. Division 1. Now, both of these divisions were supposed to have 11. It looks like both are going to be down to fields of 10. Division 1 is led, of course, by the horse who's yet to make his stakes debut, Charlton. He'll be making his stakes debut in this big Arkansas Derby. Yeah,
that's for sure, Brian. And this is the risk that comes along with splitting big races into two divisions. They separate the common interests from into separate divisions, and then they pull the pills, and it's random. And anytime something's random, this is what happens. The first division of this Arkansas Derby is clearly not as strong as the first. There's 5 horses out of in that field that have only won a maiden race, and none of them have won a stakes race as a 3-year-old. But yeah, it's all about Charlatan, and I feel like we've been down this road before with the silver-haired fox Bob Baffert, with a horse that has 2 dazzling wins as a 3-year-old and is going to make his stakes debut in a grade 1, and we're talking about Charlatan. The buyer speed figures that he got on his first 2 races are higher than any 3-year-old has earned this year.
Yeah, he looks good. That's for sure. The son of Speightstown, I think we're going to be looking at the maiden race, his debut performance. And in that race, he stalked briefly, and he was able to really handle Shoot or Shoot. We had no idea how good Shoot or Shoot was at that time, but Shoot or Shoot became a very, obviously a good horse. His next 2 starts, he won a maiden easy, and then a really dogged, strong allowance race last time. I thought Shoot or Shoot was actually a key to this race, in that I thought he was the one horse who could make Charlatan work early. Shoot or Shoot will be one of those scratches, though. He's the reason we'll be down to a field of 10. So what that means is Charlatan probably has life even easier on the front end, Matt. As good as he looked at California, there are a lot of questions. He's leaving Santa Anita for the first time as a racehorse. He's running a 1.8 miles, 2 turns for the first time, or a 1.8 miles for the first time at least. And also, he's moving up in class. Sure, it is the easier division, but it is certainly a jump up from what he's seen before. Having said that, I'm with you. Sometimes the rail draw isn't a good place to be in races like this, but I think in this instance, with his speed, natural, easy-going speed, it really sets up for the favorite. I hate to pick favorites. I hate to pick favorites with a passion, but I really don't think you can look anywhere else other than Charlatan in this race, unless he just really doesn't travel well or something odd happens at the start of the race. Charlatan looks clearly like the horse to beat in here. I think the horse that's a clear second choice, probably on the odds board, but also the most likely horse to run second, certainly would be from the top Pletcher barn mount. That's Gouverneur Morris. Gouverneur Morris I described recently as a horse who who spins his wheels a little bit. He doesn't have that quick burst of speed. Vino Rosso, the winner of the Breeders' Cup Classic last year, was a little bit that way, especially early on. Gouverneur Morris looks like a horse to me that can continue to get better. He's coming off a relatively good effort last time, but he could never get past fourth place, although he wasn't far from second. What do you think about Gouverneur Morris's chances in here?
Yeah, Brian, I agree with what you're saying. You know, in some of his races, he's run in a stalking position, and with the other speed that you mentioned, shoot or shoot, not in here. I think Gouverneur Morris can sit right in the kind of position that he wants to be in, and make a closing move. Is he good enough to get past Charlatan after Charlatan has a ground saving trip and probably will get loose on the lead and comfortable? I'm not sure, but to me, on paper, with Gouverneur Morris appearing to have room to get better, looks like the solid second choice.
Yeah, and I like him second best, unfortunately. But you know, we have to be truthful here. If it's the favorite over the second favorite, that's what you go with, and then maybe you look for superfectors or multi-race wagers. But to me, it sure looks like Charlatan's got this race in a real good way, and Gouverneur Morris is clearly the horse to beat of the rest. And I think Gouverneur Morris will keep improving, and I think Gouverneur Morris will be finishing this race well. So a likely chalky exacta here in Division One. Let's talk about a few of the others, though, Matt. And No Dior, I was one of the people that liked this horse before. He ran 3 really good races to begin his career, but as good as he was in those first 3 starts, he was that bad in his only race this year. It was the Risen Star. He had blinkers on, didn't really fire at all. Now he's had a freshening. He gets those blinkers off. I don't know if he returns to form. He's the 3rd best horse in the race, but that Risen Star has to be a worry.
Yeah, for sure, and I agree with everything that you said. And for handicappers and possible bettors, the question they have to ask are you willing to just draw a line through that Risen Star and say and blame it on the blinkers on? I guess that's a reasonable thing to do in there. And Outdoor did flash talent as a 2-year-old. The other thing that concerns me is that it's been since February, and that makes me wonder whether there was something else going on besides the blinkers.
Yeah, and I said he was the 3rd best if he runs his race. Maybe he's even better than the 3rd best if he returns to his race, but we have to see whether he can make us forget about that Risen Star performance, because it was bad. Next on the morning line, Matt, I think we'll find Basin out on the outside, and Basin looked like a really nice horse. Now, interestingly, his big win at 2 came on the slop at Saratoga in the Grade 1 Hopeful. This year, he's run in 2 races so far, and they've both been sloppy. He didn't run poorly in either one, but then again, he really wasn't threatening the winner in either one. Looks like a horse with some class, but I don't know what to make, whether he likes a fast track or slop better. And off those first 2 performances now, he certainly doesn't look, to me, as good as Charlatan or even Gouverneur Morris.
Yeah, I agree with that thought process, Brian, and I went through that, and I guess I concluded that it probably wasn't the slop because he won on the slop. Maybe it was the added distance that Basin didn't turn out to like. And my question with him in this Division 1 of the Arkansas Derby is, do they have to, because he showed speed in the past, do they have to send him from the outside and stay close to Charlatan as opposed to getting farther behind? That'll be interesting to see, but I don't really like him in this race. I think the distance is not to his liking.
Agreed, and you make a good point there. I think the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th choice here, Gouverneur Morris, No Dior, and Basin, all have the ability to stalk or maybe come from the middle of the pack, but they really have to keep an eye on Charlatan. Their only chance to win really is to keep them in their sights and see if they can really make a burst on the far turn. But yeah, of the three that I just mentioned, Basin is also the one I like least. There's only two long shots in here that really interest me much at all. I guess the one that interests me the most is from the Dallas Stewart barn. Winning Impression has looked good enough since he's been stretched out to think that a little further improvement, 9 furlongs, if one of those questionable horses like Basin or No Dior does not run the race, Winning Impression is certainly a horse who could hit the board or maybe even get up for second or third.
Yeah, my long shot that I prefer from the bunch as one that might possibly hit the trifecta, as you said, or be the one that finishes second is Wrecking Crew. Peter Miller sends this horse to Oaklawn Park. He had a pretty darn good 2-year-old campaign, Brian. This is a horse that was purchased for almost $900,000 as a 2-year-old and won a whole lot of money. Hit the board in a bunch of the graded stakes races out in California. Was third in the Breeders' Cup Classic. He came back, has one race back this year. It was a tough race to make his 2020 debut in. Turned out to be a 5th place performance, so that doesn't look really good. But it's Peter Miller that we're talking about, and I'll tell you, he's been known to spring some upsets. I'm not saying this one's going to win, but to have some horses run really well at big odds. So for me, Wrecking Crew is the one at a price that I want to use in some exactas and maybe in the trifecta also.
Yeah, Wrecking Crew for me, I don't like Wrecking Crew as much as you. And for me, Wrecking Crew really points out the question, what's up with that Breeders' Cup Juvenile? At the time, we wondered, what was up with the race where long shots were running 1, 2, 3. But of course, Storm the Court hasn't run poorly since winning, but he hasn't exactly set the world on fire. And No Dior ran a good Los Al Futurity, but then came back badly in the Risen Star. And really, Wrecking Crew wasn't all that close to those top two in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. His next 2 races, though, really make me get off him, where he was just he was way many lengths back in both of them, both to end his 2-year-old year and to start his 3-year-old year. He's not for me, but back class. Matt is right; he does have some back class. The other long shot I could see popping up, and this is a big long shot, would be Crypto Cash. He's bounced around from turf. To dirt, to turf, to synthetic surfaces, and I see some good performances in there. If he likes 9 furlongs, like I think he might, and takes to the switch back to dirt, I think Crypto Cash could make a little bit of noise at real big odds. That's all we got for Division 1, folks. Matt and I are kind of echoing each other with a Charlton on top of Gouverneur Morris, exactly, and clearly the weaker division, making Division 2 the stronger division, Matt, and with horses that have recently won the Rebel, the Tampa Bay Derby, the Louisiana Derby, Storm the Court, the champion from last year, Silver Prospector, 2-time graded stakes winner. A lot of good horses in here and some interesting long shots as well. Let's start with Nadal, Matt. I think it's interesting if you see the Oaklawn Park morning line there. Nadal 5-2, King Guillermo 3-1, Wells Bayou 7-2. What do these 3 horses have in common? They all like to be on or really close to that front pace, and Nadal will be favored, but he's got some pace pressure this time.
Yeah, that is absolutely the thing that I picked out on this race. That you've got 3 horses in the second division coming into the race off of a very big victory, and those victories were all in a similar kind of way, either on the lead or just behind, pressing the lead. And now here they are colliding in the second division, going 1 1/8. Nadal, unbeaten, 3 for 3, all in 2020. The San Vicente, the Rebel, King Guillermo, springing that big upset at 49-1 in the Tampa Bay Derby, and Wells Bayou, who I liked in the Southwest and the Louisiana Derby. He came back and won that Louisiana Derby, going 1 3/16. So he's already handled more than the 9 furlongs. But you're right, Brian. It's the 3 of them. they all seem to have the same running style. Something's got to give, so it seems.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. It'll be a bit of a cat and mouse game among the jockeys of those three, I think. But it's certainly interesting that the three favorites all like to be out there. Nadal, I have a lot of faith in Nadal. I think Nadal is a really nice horse. I like the way he fights on. I thought he was really game last time in the Rebel. And, I wonder if he's a horse that will ultimately not need the lead to succeed, but might be a tough place to find out here against this field. I do think he's the class, though, of the three-speed horses. So Nadal is the one that I want to use. He's got Joel Rosario. King Guillermo, for instance, has Sammy Camacho, who I just don't know as much about. And getting to King Guillermo, Matt, if you look at that Tampa Bay Derby, if he can reproduce that, he'd have a big shot in here. I'm just not a firm believer with the time off and not really being the one race that stands out on his past performances if he can do it again.
Yeah, and I agree with that, Brian. Typically, we've seen horses on the Derby trail win races at big prices or come in close second at big prices, and they very typically do not come back and reproduce that performance in there. I know the trainer is very, very high on this horse and says that he has no distance limitations of any kind. That's great to hear, but with that kind of horse, I'm going to need them to show me that they can reproduce that kind of performance, especially against a tough field like this.
Yeah, I'm in the wait and see mode as well, Matt, with King Guillermo. I just want to see him do it again before I really invest some money into him. And this is a good betting race, and I think one of the good reasons it's a betting race in my eyes is that I feel like King Guillermo is a horse I can not use. And I'm going to say the same about Wells Bayou. I've liked Wells Bayou too in his last few races. I just think this is a tougher spot with the speed. Louisiana Derby was a nice performance, but on the other hand, he really had a pretty comfortable trip. I think it's going to be harder for him to enjoy such a trip in here. And I think the stakes are only higher as far as the competition. So Wells Bayou, I do trust more than King Guillermo moving forward. But on the other hand, I think for me, he's a play against as the second or third choice in here. Storm the Court, Storm the Court is a horse, I think, his Son of Court Vision, I think he wants to go a distance. And I also feel like trainer Peter Urton didn't really squeeze the lemon with him early on this year. I think Storm the Court is kind of pointing for the first Saturday in May. As it turns out, that's the Arkansas Derby Division 2. But I think he was kind of trying to get his horse ready for the classics. And this is the closest thing we have to a classic this time of year. So I think Storm the Court, maybe as a first jump kind of horse behind this speed, really rates a chance in here, despite the fact that he hasn't won since the Breeders' Cup.
I could repeat every word that you said, Brian, and be in complete agreement with you. Everything you said about Wells Bayou and Storm the Court also. But there's another horse that I think we need to get to that you and I both like a lot.
Yeah, Farmington Road. Farmington Road turned out to be my main bet last time in the Oaklawn Stakes, and I really liked what I saw, even though it was a slightly weaker race than this is. But it was the same track and the same distance as we see today, and he was really far back. He had to go wide, and that horse, the long shot that you picked, Mr. Big News, wasn't really slowing down in the stretch. Still, Farmington Road was really gaining on him in the last eighth of a mile. Farmington Road really kicked it in that race. And now with a similar distance and a little bit more experience and a pace that looks to be set up for horses that can make up ground, that can rally, Farmington Road looks to have everything falling his way in this race. And I can't imagine he's lower than the fifth or sixth choice in here. So yeah, Farmington Road is a horse I think we both like quite a bit.
Yeah, Farmington Road, Todd Pletcher, son of Quality Road. We already know that the distance is no problem, and he did come flying in that Oaklawn Stakes, which is the main prep race for the Arkansas Derby. Projecting maybe 10-1, 12-1 on this horse, and just because basic handicapping says, you got 3 horses that are going to be out there on the lead, testing each other. It sets up for a closer, and I think Farmington Road is that one. A horse with some class, a horse that experience is going to help. I think Todd Pletcher's going to have him at the top of his game in here. So, and it would be very hard for me to endorse Nadal enthusiastically, who I guess gets the best post position, etc., amongst the 3 speedy horses that we're talking about. But one of those speed horses figures to hang on and be game down the stretch.
Yeah. It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting on how this race is ridden and how fast they go early, and if there's really head-to-head duels going on. You never know for sure what the jockeys are going to do. Maybe they're reading the past performances as well, and maybe it won't be as fast or contested as we see. But it looks like at least 2 of the 3, if not all 3, should at least pressure each other, and the pace should be pretty fast. I clearly like Nadal the best of the 3, but it is set up for closers, and Matt and I both like Farmington Road. I'm a little worried, Matt, that we're not alone. A lot of people are going to see what we do, and Farmington Road will be lower than we want when they hit the post as far as odds. But I tell you, with all these horses to bet, he really shouldn't be any lower than 8-1, and we're hoping for double digits on him. Another horse who can rally, and he's shown he can rally, is Silver Prospector. Matt, we haven't even talked about him yet. He won a big race at 2, and he won one of the preps for the Arkansas Derby here as well. He's sandwiched those races with a couple of performances that weren't as good, including kind of coming up on the rail in the slop to Nadal, and then really backing out as Nadal sped away with that long shot at the one chasing.
Yeah, Silver Prospector Wright won the Southwest, and it seems like he has a marked preference for a dry track. Some of those less than desirable performances that we have seen from him recently have come on the slop. Steve Asmussen on his home track, so I guess he might be in the mix coming down the stretch, but I just don't feel he's quite as classy as some of the other horses that we have mentioned.
Yeah, and I will say about this, he did win the Kentucky Jockey Club on an off track, so he's a little bit of a mystery and a little bit of an in and outer for me, but he does. I think he does have some ability, and I think he also has the ability to rally. So Silver Prospector would be a horse that I would be using in the exactas or the trifectas or superfectas if you're going that way. Another horse I think we should mention, Matt, as a real long shot is Finnick the Fierce, because we're talking about a race that sets up for ralliers. He's on the rail. Martine Garcia's up. I expect him, with all these horses to be bet, to be 20-1 or higher. And if you look at his consistent rallies, he's a horse, if the race sets up well and he gets the trip, I think Finnick the Fierce is a real threat to get into the picture too, at much higher odds than anyone else we talked about.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I think one of the neat things about this Oaklawn meeting has been the rejuvenation of a couple of California jockeys coming out in Joe Talamo and Martine Garcia, who are battling for the jockey title there.
Yeah. All right, Matt. Hey, we talked about both divisions of the Arkansas Derby, but we haven't put out any suggested wagers. And I know a lot of people out there like to see what we're thinking as far as some of the bets we're going to make. Let me jump back to Division 1 because it starts in Division 1. I'm going to play a little pick 3. I think Charlatan is the horse to beat, so I'm going to single Charlatan in this pick 3. And then I'm going to use the 3 horses that I like the best in a really tough division of the Oaklawn Handicap, but I've narrowed it down to the 3 or maybe 4. Let me give you 4. I'm going to go Charlatan on top of my top 4 in the Oaklawn Handicap, which are Tacitus, By My Standards, Improbable, and Combatant. And then I'm just going to go too deep in the second, another tough division, but the second division of the Arkansas Derby. I have to use Nadal. I think he's probably the best horse in the race, but I have to use Farmington Road. Hopefully we'll get 10-1 on him, Matt, and if he can close that pick 3, it should pay pretty well.
Yeah, and certainly if I was playing a pick 3, I would use similar strategy, Brian. Charlatan, a single. I would spread more in the Oaklawn Handicap. I think it's a race that has a lot of talented older males in there, and none of them are big standouts to me. A lot of them have run some really good races. So I would spread. I would maybe go 7 deep in the Oaklawn Handicap, because with Charlatan in the first leg, I'm going to be looking and hoping for a bigger price in there. And then in the second division of the Arkansas Derby, I probably would use 4 horses in there with Farmington Road, and then the 3 front-running favorites also, and that still doesn't make a big ticket at $1 pick 3. That's only going to be $28 or $24 kind of pick 3.
Yeah, the good thing about mine, and that's a different strategy, starting with the same strategy, but the good thing about mine is I could put $5 on this, because I've really narrowed it down to 4x2 in the second and third legs, and $5 pick 3 would only cost you $40. So another way to look at it, I'm gonna throw out King Guillermo and Wells Bayou. Certainly I fear them. Certainly I know they're good horses, but in this race, the way it sets up, I'm going to throw them out. So when I play my exactas in the Arkansas Derby Division 2, I'm just going to key Nadal and Farmington Road. Those are the 2 I like. 2-1 maybe on Nadal, 10-1 on Farmington Road. I'll take that as an exacta. I'm going to play them a series of exacta boxes with other horses, all with odds that could get in there as well. And hopefully Farmington Road is the one that runs first or second over Nadal, and I can really hit a nice exacta. So I would use Nadal Farmington Road with Storm the Court, Nadal Farmington Road with Silver Prospector, and Nadal Farmington Road with Finnick the Fierce, and that would be my favorite combination of the 3. Again, King Guillermo, Wells Bayou, good horses, second and third choice, but I don't like the race setup for him in here. I think Nadal is better. That's why I'm going to throw him out of my exactas and my pick 3s.
Yeah, in terms of my play with Farmington Road, I'm going to key Farmington Road in an exacta key box, because I think for me, to get a good exacta price, I'm going to want Farmington Road to either win the race or finish second. And then I'm going to place Farmington Road with Storm the Court, who I give a chance to possibly get that second place finish. And then also with King Guillermo, Nadal, and Wells Bayou, because I feel like, as I said before, that one of them could very well be around at the end of the race with a shot to win it or finish second. But to get any value, I'm going to need Farmington Road to get first or second.
Well, I'm looking for extreme value. Farmington Road, Finnick the Fierce. Let's see if they can both come from the clouds in Division 2 of the Arkansas Derby. All right, Matt. Arkansas Derby aside, the best race of the weekend, in my mind, is the race we started to talk a little bit about. It's Saturday between the 2 divisions. It's the Oaklawn Handicap, 1.1 miles for the older horses, Matt. And you have got a big field of 14 with multiple stakes winners. I didn't even count how many of them are coming off a stakes win in their last race, but the number is a lot. And despite that, all these horses coming in off stakes wins, I'm going to pick a horse who hasn't won for, I don't know how long, Matt. I guess it's been a year. But I think this race might set up well for the classy, the consistent Tacitus.
Okay. Yeah, and like you said, I agree, Brian. This is a deep field. And yes, there are many of them. I count at least 4 that are coming in off of a victory last time and need to be considered. For me, I'm going to stick with, as my top pick, I'm going to stick with By My Standards. His 2 races have been very good, and I think he is a horse that has still got lots of room to improve in here. Do you want to quickly run down a bunch of the other horses in the field?
Yeah, By My Standards is a big threat in here, and I could see him becoming one of the best older horses in America. He's looked that good in his 2 races at Fairgrounds this year, including the New Orleans Classic, stalking and pouncing. I thought he kind of got an easy trip in the New Orleans Classic. He only had 1 horse to run down, and it turned out that horse didn't run a great race, but he sure looked good doing it. Now he's also the Louisiana Derby winner, his second to last race as a 3-year-old. But what do those wins have in common that look so good? Louisiana Derby last year, Allowance this year, New Orleans Classic, they're all at Fairgrounds. That makes me pause just a little bit. By my standards, needs to prove he can be that type of, he looks like he very well could be a grade 1 horse, but he needs to prove that he can be a grade 1 horse away from that same track, which is the Fairgrounds. He'll get that chance at the Oaklawn Handicap. Problem is, it's a tough Oaklawn Handicap, Matt. I think I counted at least 7 horses who won their stakes, won a stakes race in their last start. That's how tough this race is. Another thing about By My Standards is he's got speed, quality speed right in front of him here. And I don't know how easy these horses are going to want to relinquish the lead to By My Standards stalking trip. Talking about Mr. Freeze, who's been excellent this year, and Warrior's Charge of Brad Cox, another Brad Cox horse who I have a lot of respect for.
Yeah, Brian, and you know, like I said when we were talking about that pick 3, even though I'll make By My Standards my top pick, you heard me say that in that pick 3, I would want to use about 7 horses who I really feel have a chance to get the victory. You mentioned Mr. Freeze, his last race, his race in the Gulfstream Park Mile was a dazzler. He earned a big speed figure in there. So Mr. Freeze, definitely for Dale Romans, is one of those horses that's dangerous.
Yeah, Mr. Freeze, I kind of like the bet against angle on him here for me. Mr. Freeze looks absolutely sensational. I remember the West Virginia Derby a couple years ago and this last Gulfstream Park Mile. But on the other hand, if you look at some of his tougher tests, he kind of folded the tent just a little bit. Now, I know he was second in the Pegasus, but he offered little resistance to Mucho Gusto. He really didn't offer too much resistance last fall to Tom's Day Top. Really good horses, obviously, but I just have a feeling with pace pressure, and that's going to come from Warrior's Charge, because Warrior's Charge, I tell you what, I think he's won 4 of his last 5, and his only loss was a game performance in the Preakness. Warrior's Charge is a tough speed horse. But the 2 of them together, I think they cancel each other out a little bit, and I think maybe Warrior's Charge hangs around longer than Mr. Freeze does, frankly, and I'm hoping that Mr. Freeze is even the favorite off those 2 big Gulfstream Park performances this year. That speed sets it up for someone to come and get him. First Jump is By My Standards and also Improbable. By the way, what are the chances, Matt, of this nice Baffert horse getting the 14 hole in back-to-back trips to Oaklawn Park?
Yeah, that's a tough draw. Granted that in the last time he drew the 14 hole, but there were some scratches, so he ended up actually coming like out of the 11 hole, but still far outside. And he ran a heck of a race in that Oaklawn Park Mile, as we remember. He, from way out there, got the lead, had control heading into the stretch, looked like a winner coming down the stretch at the 16th pole, the 8th pole or so, but he was no competition for Tom's Day Tot. And again, it sounds like we're using some of these races with Tom's Day Tot winning as a bit of a measuring stick. But yeah, Brian, now here he is again, out all the way out on the 14th hole against a really tough field, tough break for Improbable, who's been having trouble finding the winner's circle, and maybe the case again here. Yeah,
of the 4 I used in this race, Improbable was 4th on my list. I think he does have his work cut out for him, but on the other hand, that Oaklawn Mile was a really, really good performance. Personally, I think Tom's Day Top would be better than any single horse in this race. So the fact that Improbable gave him all he wanted in that Oaklawn Mile is a good indication that Improbable fits in with this group. By my standards, Improbable are the first 2 probably to get the jump of the major horses that we see in here. Maybe Trophy Chaser too. Trophy Chaser's was sprinting for a while. We always knew he was a talented horse. We saw him run against Improbable at Churchill Downs a few years ago as juveniles, if you remember, Matt. But his last 2 were stretch outs, cheaper. but they were very good performances. So I wouldn't completely discount Trophy Chaser in here. But you got all those horses with the first jump capability. It kind of, again, just like the second division of the Arkansas Derby, I think it sets it up a little bit for a closer. And the two obvious ones are Tacitus and Combatant. Combatant won a big one last time in the Santa Anita Handicap. But on the other hand, the Santa Anita Handicap got weakened by horses not running in it this year. And I want to see what the Sadler runner does again, but I think you got to respect him off that race and the fact that he can rally. But still, I come back to Tacitus. I know he's lost a lot of races in a row, but he has just been keeping the very best of company. He always makes his move, consistent horse. I think this might be the setup and the race type that he's wanted recently, and I like him as a very, very lukewarm choice.
Yeah, and absolutely, Tacitus is a horse that I am going to use in the horizontal wagers. Like you said, maybe has a class edge consistently over this field. Grade 1, grade 1, grade 1s all over his past performances, and second place, third place finishes in all of them. Some time to mature. Quality barn, Bill Mott. You have to use Tacitus in here. No doubt he's going to get the win. Not an easy spot. Combatant. I like him less than some of the others, but again, you probably have to throw him in, and I'll throw him in that pick 3. The Santa Anita Handicap was a mile and a quarter. This race, I don't know, with all of the speed and the size of the field, it just doesn't seem to shape up well for Combatant.
Okay, fair enough. I like the ralliers a little bit more than Matt, but at least 6 really good horses. It'll be interesting to see how it's bet. And then after all those 6 horses, you got horses like Trophy Chaser, who I mentioned, Identifier, Night Ops, Sky Promise. Sky Promise is a stone cold closer who could come flying, all come out of stakes wins against cheaper. And then you got some back class there with Tax and Bravazzo. Just a really terrific race, Matt. We've been talking about this Oaklawn Handicap. We can't forget about the fillies on Friday, and in with the Kentucky Oaks also postponed. This has become the best 3-year-old filly race of the first half of the year. You got 14 in here, Matt, and I think we need to start with Venetian Harbor, who her last 2 wins at Santa Anita, much like Charlton, she's won her last 2 races by a combined 20 lengths.
Yeah, I know. We're sounding a little bit like a broken record here with these Oaklawn races saying field of 14, field of 14, and here we go again. Yes, Venetian Harbor. Those victories were monstrous right out of the gate, opening up huge leads and settling down nicely, getting into a cruising speed. And when that happened in those races, all the other horses have to come out of their preferred running style and get used a little bit early to just try and stay close to the horse, and then turning for home. She just was able to kick it in and keep going and draw off by those big victories.
Yeah, there's really no telling how good she is. She's obviously got a lot of speed, a high cruising speed, and very talented. Another 3-year-old filly, daughter of Munnings. Munnings is lining up quality 3-year-old fillies this year as his sire. Richard Baltus brings her in. She's going to be the favorite. I really have no doubt. I have no idea who's going to be the favorite in the Oaklawn Handicap, but in the fantasy, Venetian Harbor will be the favorite, and I think you got to try to beat her in here. She's coming from Oaklawn Park. There is other speed for sure in this race, and I think she'll be a pretty clear favorite. So I'm going to try to beat her. And the first on the list, Matt, I think it's the one that you like best, is the 2-year-old filly champion of last year, British Idiom.
Yeah, that's true, Brian. British Idiom is going to be my top choice in this race. Maybe it was a little disappointing that she finished second in her last start in the Rachel Alexandra, but that was her debut, and she ran into, I don't know, a horse who may be the best 3-year-old filly in the division, and that is Finite. There's no Finite. Finite is not in this race. I think British Idiom is going to benefit from that second place finish in the Rachel Alexandra and get a favorable setup for her closing move.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I think this race could set up well for her. She doesn't need to be way out of it. She can be kind of a middle of the pack type of filly. There's speed ahead of her. There's good speed ahead of her, including Swiss Skydiver, who won nicely, wired the Gulfstream Park Oaks last time at odds of 9-1. But I think it does set up pretty well for British Idiom. We need her to improve, though, off that performance, because I don't think it was a great performance when she was second to Finite, but not a bad performance. Every reason to believe second time out for another Brad Cox training. Second time out, the daughter of Flashback will improve for trainer Brad Cox, and she'll be one of the major factors late in this race. We mentioned Swiss Skydiver, another horse who could show speed. I think there's other longer shots who could show speed as well in here, but Lake Avenue kind of stayed off of Swiss Skydiver last time in the Gulfstream Park Oaks, and it probably cost her, although she ran on well to be a good third in that race. But I think they might use her a little bit more because she has done her best running on the front end. Maybe that was a result of having battled on the lead in the Busher and backed out of it a little bit. But I think she's another quality horse who could add speed. Sets it up for British Idiom, but it also sets it up for the horse I'm going with as my top pick in here, and that's Harvey's Lil Goyle. Harvey's Lil Goyle, I gotta go back to my Eastern roots to get that accent. Harvey's Lil Goyle really blew weaker fields away last time, but I really like everything about those races other than how good is she. The one thing we do see, though, in that Busanda win where she blew the field away, the horse that ran second came back and beat some good fillies in the Busher. So that's something on her side. But I think this race sets up for, well, like you said, with the speed. And I do believe that Harvey's Little Goyle is at least a for-real type of closing filly. And this might be a good spot to get her as the fourth, fifth choice.
Yeah, Brian, a daughter of American Pharaoh, trained by Bill Mott. Both of those add endorsements to what you've said about Harvey's Lil Goyle, and and the odds are going to be attractive.
Yeah, I like her closing kick. She's got a little bit more late kick than British Idiom. British Idiom probably will make that move a little bit earlier than Harvey's Little Goyle. But I think Harvey's Little Goyle might be able to pick up all the pieces because I expect this pace to be pretty darn strong. And that's why I feel reasonably good against betting against the favorite Venetian Harbor. Steve Asmussen has two interesting fillies in here. Alta's Award looks like she's developing to a nice filly. And Fire Coral, a daughter of Curlin, might be good. She's coming off 2 straight wins at Oaklawn Park. Alta's Award lost a tough one to She Dares the Devil last time. Who came from California and ran a good race. Lazy Daisy won the Pocahontas, but hasn't run this year yet. And I got a real bomb for you in here, Matt. How about Kansas Kiss getting into the exotics? Because I thought she made a premature move when first stretched out for the Busher and got nailed on the wire. But I think Kansas Kiss, I want to say Kansas Kiss because of Kiss and Chris, who our producer Brett Workman always loves. But her name is Kansas Kiss. And I think Kansas Kiss might be able to move forward off that Busher at 20-1 or more and sneak into the exotics.
Yeah, that Ray Handel trainee is going to be a bomb. I was at that race at Aqueduct, and he thought he had a big win there until Water White came and just got her at the end. It's an interesting race. But because there are a lot of horses who are going to be worried about what Venetian Harbor is doing early on in there. The other speeds are going to be worried about Venetian Harbor getting away. Those stalkers are not going to want to let her get too far behind. And maybe one of those horses that's going to just do their thing and idle at the back of the pack and make their one late closing move. And maybe that's a big plus for them. Yeah.
Swiss Skydiver we haven't talked about much, but I think she's got to go. after what she did in the Gulfstream Park Oaks. And then there's another filly or two in here who will be real long shots, but should add to this pace. So it looks like a strong pace for Venetian Harbor to have to deal with. That's why I like Harvey best, British Idiom second best, and Kansas Kiss as my long shot. All right, folks, 4 big races at Oaklawn Park. Matt and I went through them all. I hope everything we did here helps you as you get ready and you handicap these races, and look forward to watching them on Friday and 3 on Saturday. Hey, Matt, can I get a closing parting shot from you, my friend?
Sure. I guess my closing parting shot will be about the closing of Oaklawn Park and with the Arkansas track ending their winter-spring meeting. We just don't know what's coming up next. We don't know if any of the big 3 will be opening up soon. Santa Anita, Belmont Park, Churchill Downs. So I guess pretty much, Brian, we have no idea what the next graded stakes race is going to be.
Yeah, well, this is the last big weekend for a while, that's for sure. But I'm hopeful that, and rumblings we're hearing is that some of these tracks will be opening up, sans fans, but they will be opening up for races. So we'll see what happens. But I guess enjoy this great weekend of racing down in Hot Springs, Arkansas, while you can, is what Mr. Shippen is really saying. And never fear. HorseCenter will be back next week to talk about maybe what's happened this week, but also with an interesting edition of the show, no matter what the big races look like in the next week or two. Matt, I want to thank our sponsor, Derby Wars, the best contest site out there. I want to thank our producer, the best producer out there, Brett Workman. I also want to thank you fans for tuning in every week. If you haven't yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, go ahead and do that now. But we sure do appreciate you tuning in every week. Anything else, Matt?
Hey, I want everybody to, as always, stay safe. We can't take that for granted if we're going to ride this out for the long haul. Bet the races from home, support the racing that's going on, make a charitable contribution to help support the backstretch workers. These are all little things that we can do to help.
Always well said. Thank you, Matt. And thank you, folks, for watching. We'll be back next week with another edition of HorseCenter. See you then.